All right, everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to today's webinar, 11 Skills Your Quality Team Needs to Have. I'm Emily Bradford from InfinityQS, and I'll be moderating the webinar. The presentation portion will last about 45 minutes today, and there will be time for questions and answers at the end. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the Q&A panel, and Doug will answer them at the end of the webinar. Also, if you're interested in reviewing today's presentation, we will be sending you a copy of the slides and posting a recording of the webinar in our webinar archives on the InfinityQS website. Now I'd like to introduce you to our presenter, Doug Fair. Doug is the Vice President of Technical Services at InfinityQS and oversees our technical support, training, and application engineering staff. Prior to joining InfinityQS in 1997, Doug began his career on the manufacturing shop floor at Boeing Aerospace and spent several years working as a consultant to Fortune 500 companies. All right, Doug, I'll let you take it from here.
All right, thank you, Emily. I appreciate that. And welcome, everybody. Doug Fair here with InfinityQS. I'm very pleased to be able to spend a little time with you this afternoon to talk about 11 skills your quality team needs to have. I spent the past quarter century, which sounds a lot longer than 25 years for some reason, but I spent the past quarter century working in the quality arena. And I have to admit, I am a statistician, and I did work for the Boeing company out on the shop floor, making SPC work long time ago, 25 years ago, and I spent a few years working for Boeing, and then I did consulting work for a few years, and have been at InfinityQS now for 15. All along the way, though, I've leveraged analysis capabilities that I have, but I have been very, very interested in the team side of things, and I've found that the most effective quality teams have the ability to combine the technical skills with interpersonal skills to be the most effective that they can possibly be. I have had the privilege of working with many, many different types of quality teams, whether it's a quality management team, whether it's a Six Sigma team, whether it's teams doing benchmarking and whatnot. I've done a lot of teamwork. I've led a lot of teams. I've interacted with a lot of teams, and I've helped a lot of teams, and I'm very excited about that. And yet we find that there's some skills that the most successful teams embody, and I want to go over those 11 skills with you here today. Now, it's not going to be all-encompassing. You probably know a few more skills that I'm not going to share with you, and that's okay, but I just wanted to share with you from our perspective what those skills are. And I'd like to start first with just going through the agenda very quickly. We're going to talk about past, present, and future in regards to quality systems. And then secondly, I want to talk about some employment data, because when we boil it all down, it's the quality of the people we have on those teams that help those teams become as successful as possible. Then we're going to talk about the meat of the presentation, which is the skills your quality team needs to have. We'll have a quick conclusion and then some Q&A after about 45 minutes or so. Okay, let's start talking about the past. My experience from 25 years ago, and even now, I've found that quality has been segmented by plant. Now, what I mean by that is that one plant may have certain quality systems in place that another plant does not have, and that's, of course, for the same company. And so what we see there is that those differences can cause issues with quality systems and with quality teams, because different quality standards, when they're found across the organization, that can really trip up a team when they go from plant to plant trying to make improvements. Also, what we've seen in the past is organizations having a hodgepodge of manual and paper-based systems. And what we found there is that the paper-based systems, they're great for confirmatory type checks, they're great for verification checks, but ultimately when you boil it all down, paper is very challenging to work with, and it makes it very difficult for quality teams to consume that data when it resides on a bunch of pieces of paper. When I was at the Boeing company, a portion of our quality system resided in file cabinets. And so when an operator needed to, say, get a control chart for the particular part number they're running, they would have to walk a couple hundred yards away to the file cabinet and then rifle through the file cabinet and try to find that one piece of paper that they needed in order to help control their process. Well, things have changed. And when we look at what's happening today in the quality world, enormous amounts of data are now available in electronic form. Whether you're running SAP or some other ERP system, or you're running an MES product, or you've got SPC, or maybe you've got some other electronic systems out there. There's just an inordinate amount of data that companies have available at their fingertips. But then again, there's a problem with that. The problem is, well, it's a huge amount of data. And secondly, those different types of data are typically found in different islands of information. And so for a quality team to be able to look across an enterprise at lots of different systems, it's not quite as bad as looking at lots of pieces of paper. But when those data values are in vastly different formats from one system to the next, again, it really ties the hands of your quality teams because it's very difficult to consume that data, even if it is in electronic format. Also, presently, cloud solutions do influence and are influencing the overall quality systems today. And what I mean by cloud solutions is that if you've ever done the internet banking, that's a great cloud solution for doing banking. So it doesn't matter if I'm at my computer here in my office, or if I'm traveling on the road somewhere in Europe, or if I've just got a cell phone in my hand, I can do cloud banking just through those electronic devices without having to be tied to a particular workstation. So what's really cool about that is that technology is now infiltrating the quality world. And so cloud systems are infinitely easier to work with than these local area network systems because you can be anywhere and access the same system. You don't have to physically be there to access the system. Also, from a cost standpoint, cost structures are dramatically lower with these cloud solutions than they are with the local area network type solutions because it's just so much simpler to support. IT people don't have to have servers at every plant. They can just have the server space rented up in cyberspace somewhere. And you don't have to have software installed on the computer. Instead, all you got to do is just pick up your PDA, type in the web address, and off you go. So the cloud solutions are definitely influencing overall quality systems. Also, enterprise-wide standards are presently being focused on, and what I talk about there is methodological consistency. The methods being employed from one plant to another across the entire enterprise, that's what organizations are trying to do today because of efficiencies, because of the ability to dramatically decrease costs. That's what organizations are trying to do, and it helps from a quality standpoint as well. Also, automation, integration, analysis, control, these are all words being used today because we have the technology to be able to automate data collection, to automate analysis, to integrate with IT infrastructures. So that's what we're doing presently for quality systems. And now when we look out into the future, it's a different world, and these are some of the things we are seeing, and this is based upon not only our experience but research that we've done within InfinityQS International, and that is that global quality standards are being put into play throughout the entire supply chain. So what I mean by that, this is no longer, the whole idea of putting in place a quality system is no longer being relegated simply to the enterprise for an organization. It's not just across the plants that we own as a company. Instead, in the future, we're seeing that global standards will be deployed throughout the entire supply chain. So in other words, beyond our four walls, into the supply base, into the vendors' plants. So that the reason why that we're seeing that is that the whole idea of the global supply chain, if we can reduce costs, in particular quality costs in that supply chain, we need to have visibility into those suppliers' plants. So the sharing of quality between suppliers and customers, don't be surprised when that happens. And in some cases, it's happening today, but this is going to be expanded dramatically, we think, in the future. And that means we've got to be able to have the technology to be able to link into those supplier plants and view that data. And if we can do that, then we've got real-time upstream and downstream visibility in the quality system. We believe that in the future that there's so many companies out there vying for a piece of the pie. Well, the pie itself is the same size, but all these additional competitors are slicing out pieces of that pie, and that makes everyone else's piece a little smaller. So quality is going to become the differentiator for organizations trying to market their products in the marketplace. Bottom line is rapid technological change. Just looking back 10 years, 15 years, it's extraordinary what we have seen. Does anybody remember 3.5-inch floppy disks or 5.25-inch floppy disks, whatever they were? There's no such thing as floppy disks anymore. I mean, that's just in the past decade or so that those have just kind of gone the way of the dodo bird. So rapid technological change is what we're seeing, and you know what? Your quality team has got to keep up. So that was past, present, future. And when we look at quality systems, we kind of look through this model. This is an InfinityQS model that at the center of the model is something we call the SPC Quality Hub. Now, think of the Quality Hub as a single database, a single repository for all of your critical quality data. Now, if you can imagine, not just your quality data across your plants, but quality data from your suppliers and vendors might go to this Quality Hub as well. What that would allow you to do is, from a single place, ensure process control not just in your plants, but in other plants, even the vendors. Also, if we can have that data in that one database, then we can drive continual improvement across the enterprise, across the supply chain. That's the idea, at least. Now, how does that start? Well, we have to have data in that Quality Hub. And so if you'll look at the 9 o'clock position, you'll see a bubble that says data collection and integration. And so it starts there. So in order to get data into that Quality Hub, we have to automate data collection. We have to somehow get data to be entered into that system so we can analyze it. And so it starts there. And then once we have the data collection in place and we've integrated into the IT infrastructure, and we've done this over the cloud or wherever, then once we've got the data, we've got the ability to, at the 12 o'clock position, this bubble says real-time monitoring and analysis. And so we have the ability now we have the data, we can analyze that data, we can monitor that data in real time to see if we have any hiccups, if we have any quality issues that need attention. Then, once we've done that, if you look at the 3 o'clock position, it says workflow management. We believe that once you've done the real-time monitoring after the data collection, you're doing the real-time monitoring, after you've done that, then you have the ability to look at all those data streams and prioritize which ones are the most important. And what I mean by that is because of this advancement that we've seen in the past several years regarding automation, we've got the ability to link into just about any data stream that you can imagine. So what does that mean? It means we can monitor lots and lots and lots of data streams. But the Pareto principle applies here. Only a small proportion of those data streams are probably the most important to analyze. So once we define which of those are priorities, then we put in place workflow management. And what we mean by that is we're going to carefully watch those data streams, and we're going to put in place actions that specify when that data collection has to occur. And if there's some problem with that data, then we can escalate that automatically so that we have the ability to prevent any serious quality problems from happening. And if there were serious quality problems, then we minimize the amount of time that those quality problems are actually active. So data collection, real-time monitoring, workflow management, and then lastly, at the 6 o'clock position is what we call advanced reporting. So this is where your Six Sigma teams and your quality teams will get together, and they'll look at the data and they'll data mine. So this is where you're able to mine those golden nuggets of improvement to dramatically reduce costs and improve long-term quality within the quality system. So this is kind of the model we look at that we advocate for not just present-day quality systems, but future quality systems as well. But you know what? There's some things, if you're a quality manager, there's some things that keep you awake at night. And from the quality managers that I've spoken with, the quality professionals that I work with, sometimes it boils down, actually a lot of the time, it boils down to talent. Who do we have that we can put on that team that's going to be able to be effective and help that team get down the path further to improving quality? So that's a challenge. It's a huge challenge. In fact, if we take a look at the hardest U.S. jobs to fill in 2012, by the way, this data comes from Manpower Group, but if we look at the top 10 hardest U.S. jobs to fill, take a look at the top 3, skilled trades, engineers, and IT staff. These are the types of skills and capabilities that you typically need and typically have on successful quality teams. You need people with technical knowledge. You need people with IT knowledge. You need people that are skilled in statistical methods and other kinds of quality improvement techniques. But those top 3, those are the most difficult to fill. And yet, even with our more than 8% unemployment here in the United States, we continue to hear quality professionals saying, you know what, we're having a hard time finding those really skilled people. So with that in mind, it is expensive. Hey, look, we know it's very expensive to hire people. You have administrative costs. You have productivity issues, operational costs, recruitment costs, all kinds of costs that are that you have to consider when hiring in new team members. And yet we need them. We need them to be skilled. And we look at non-managerial hires these people, well, when you look at that cost, it's 150% of annual compensation. By the way, this comes from hr.toolbox.com. But when you look at hiring someone who's not even in a managerial position, it's really going to cost you 150% of their annual compensation because of the training costs, because of all the costs associated with hiring that new person. When you look at management staff, it's much higher than that. It's 200 to 250% of annual compensation that has to be employed to get those people. So the point I'm making here is that when you need a talented person, it's not only going to be expensive to employ them, but to hire them as well. And then if we have the issues of turnover or anything like that, then it becomes even more expensive and challenging because you don't have the consistency on a team. So once you have that team member or those team members, they need to have the skills. And as we know, the skill sets are changing that need to be employed by these quality teams, and so training is vitally important. Just looking down at the bullet points here, training as a percent of payroll. By the way, this is sourced out of ASTD.com. But training as a percent of payroll is more than 2% for most organizations. This is on average, of course. Training as a percent of profit, almost 11%. So companies today are spending a tremendous amount of time and money on training those team members so that they're as effective as possible. But it's not going to stop. Once we have them trained, we still have to allow them to learn new stuff. So given all of that, given the fact that, you know what, quality managers stay up at night because we need to get that talent on our teams. We need to be effective, and we need to make those improvements as soon as possible. Given that, and given also the fact that it's difficult to find those very talented people, and it's difficult to hire them, and it's expensive to do so, then what do we do? How do we improve the quality teams we have today? And also, if we're going to hire some people, what skills do you want to look for? Well, first and foremost, now there are 11 skills here, but first and foremost, I want to hopefully surprise some of you with this first item on the list. We believe that there's an understanding. This is a skill that the quality teams need. There needs to be an understanding on the team of the amount of variation introduced by measurement devices. Now, let me explain that. For those of you who are familiar with measurement devices, you might think of an electronic device, a scale, a gauge, whatever. What's interesting about these devices is they typically have LED formats that tell you what the number was, whether it's a weight or as a thickness or measurement of some type, whatever. There's some sort of an LED output that says, there's your number. And we tend to believe that number. I know I do. And I'll follow my own sword here and say, you know what, when we have a digital piece of equipment out there and we get a number and it's important for our quality system, there's a tendency to say, okay, that's my number, that's good, I'll write it down or I'll bring that into the system, whatever. Well, we have to understand that those devices are not perfect and that sometimes those systems have inherent variability that people just don't understand that can cause you issues. For example, I worked with this company who was painting these very expensive steel products, and they wanted this painting process to have coverage. In other words, they wanted the steel to be covered with paint, but they didn't want the paint to be too thick because that meant weight and cost. So what they did was they purchased this very expensive device that was a non-destructive tester. Once they painted the product and it had dried, they could take this non-destructive tester, touch it against the workpiece. It would send an electronic signal to the metal underneath and send that signal back to this device and therefore calculate what the thickness of the paint was. Well, what we found was that this team found that about 40% of the product was being scrapped. And they just struggled trying to understand what it is they were doing wrong because they hadn't really changed anything. And so they were sending these products back for scrap, for rework. They were having to strip the products and repaint them and so forth. Well, finally someone said, wait a minute, let's take a closer look at this device itself. And so they did a gauge R&R, a gauge repeatability and reproducibility on that. They looked at the measurement system basically itself, and they found that given the thickness specification of the paint, that the natural inherent variability of the device itself, this LED digital device, the natural inherent variability of that device itself took up about 60% of the specification width. So what they were doing is they found that, you know what, this measurement device was simply not capable of giving them the accuracy and the repeatability they needed in order to define whether or not the thickness of the paint was right or not. So that was a big issue, and they figured out, okay, look, we may have to spend more money on a different device, But you know what? If it's more accurate and the measurement system itself produces less variability, then it's going to be much better. But that's from a device standpoint. A lot of people don't consider the human measurement part of the equation. So in other words, opinion or someone telling someone else, hey, here's the facts. Well, another example of the measurement system is I worked with another company that they're a soybean producer, and they provide soybeans, millions of tons of soybeans to companies all over the world. And what they did is they recognized that the primary quality measure of their soybeans was the taste. The taste of the soybeans. Did it taste right, quote unquote? And so how do you measure that? Well, this company devised a certification program, and they have certified 12 different tasters on their staff. And the taster's job all day long is to taste these soybean products, to sample these soybean products to make sure that they're right. And they actually would certify each person in 20 different tastes. So things like salt, sugariness, metallic tastes, burned taste, and they would certify them each week. Every taster, all 12 of them, have to go through a certification every single week. And so here's the thing. Because taste is so important to this company, they put in place the measurement system necessary to remove the variability from the equation and remove the opinion as well. So I just wanted to share with you those couple of examples because it is vitally important that when you look at a number, when you get a value, when you use data as a team, that you have not only an understanding of that data, but you trust its accuracy, you trust it's actually representative of the system that you're measuring. So that one, I hope that makes sense. That's one skill teams need. A second skill is the effective usage of data analysis tools. Now, for the most part, you look at something like Microsoft Excel. It's got a ton of analysis tools built in there. But there are other analysis tools, just basic statistical tools that people need to understand. Third, problem-solving skills. And some people may look at this and say, yeah, we have problem-solving skills. But my experience has been that these quality teams that I have interacted with over the last 25 years, for the most part, I would say a majority of them have never been trained in the methodology of problem solving. And there's lots of different methodologies out there. So this is one of those skills that I think a lot of people take for granted, and they say, yes, we have problem-solving skills because Bob over here is a smart guy and so is Mary. Well, that's fine if they're smart people, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they have the ability to problem solve. So I suggest to teams that they put their teams through a formal training on problem solving, and I've been surprised with the results of doing so. Fourth, quality teams need analytical and research skills. Now, this may sound similar to item number 2, but it really has to do with analytical and research skills really have to do with data mining, the aggregation of enormous amounts of data so that you can mine those golden nuggets out of them. So it's a little different in that the skills and the tools are different and the situation is different as well. But the idea, item number 4, is looking at tremendous volumes of data versus smaller amounts of data in item number 2. Okay, item number 5, another skill that quality teams need, the ability to effectively interact with other departments and suppliers. I have been so impressed. Those of you who are quality managers, quality professionals, I'm very impressed with you because I see over and over and over again these people have to interact not just with organizations and the different departments within their plant, within their organization, but outside of their organization. Quality managers are all the time going out to customer sites, dealing with issues on site, dealing with supplier issues and so forth. So there's a tremendous variety of people that quality professionals have to interact with, and those special interactive skills are so vitally important to a quality team. Leadership skills. Now, this is one of those all-encompassing kind of buckets you can put skills into, but what I've seen is that those teams that do not have someone who steps up to the plate, someone who doesn't, if teams do not have a leader on that team, they typically flounder. It's typical from what I've seen is that if someone doesn't step to the plate and say, hey, look, I think this is the direction we ought to take. someone who doesn't have that strength to stand up and be the leader, those teams don't do very well. But those teams that do have someone who naturally comes up and says, you know what, let's figure this out and let's go down this path, those teams do far better and are far more efficient when they've got someone who's willing to do that. And that's not necessarily so easy. Another skill is the willingness to learn new methods and systems. Now, how do you measure that? Well, a lot of it's attitude. A lot of it is simply someone being open-minded. But what we're finding with this rapid technological change is that people must be willing to look at things, different things, with open eyes, with open arms, and be willing to embrace new technologies and new capabilities. And those people who are willing to do that, they typically are fast learners, and they greatly benefit a quality team. Multiple priorities. My goodness, we're finding more and more that companies are leaner and leaner and leaner. I was so surprised. I went to a company plant several years ago and went through the plant, did an assessment. And I was so surprised that I didn't see a whole lot of people. This huge plant was being run with a real skeleton crew, and it was very surprising. But it was amazing how these people were forced, therefore, to have a very stringent priorities list where they had to work that priority list every single day, or they just simply couldn't get their work done. So managing multiple priorities, that's a very important skill for quality teams. Teamwork skills by themselves. There's lots of training on your basic teamwork skills, and what you'll find is you can go in a lot of different directions on this. But it depends. In some cases, those teamwork skills depend on the industry you're in, and also what exactly that team is attacking. Communication skills, the ability to listen with two ears and listen effectively and work together effectively. It's huge. And again, it's one of those things that we hear a lot. Communication skills, yeah. Well, there are training classes in communication skills, how to listen, the best way to interact with individuals. And I have been surprised when I've attended those training classes. I've been really surprised that there's actually very good information in those classes that have benefited me. Lastly, applying good judgment and decision-making skills is vitally important. And sometimes you want to do this based on data and information, but sometimes you have to balance that data with other things like safety and whatnot. But these are the 11 skills that quality teams absolutely need to have in order to be the highest performing teams possible. And when we look at them in a little different way, you can separate them into hard skills and soft skills. So the hard skills on the left-hand side, there's only 4 of them, but most of them fall into the bucket of analytical skills, numeric and statistical and analysis skills, whatever you want to call them. But those are the hard skills. On the right-hand side, those 7 items, those are the soft skills. And I think that what I've seen is teams typically want to do the stuff on the left-hand side because, you know what, I can put my numbers into Excel, or I can use this SPC software, or I can use this analysis tool. But you can have all the hard skills and all the analysis tools you want, but if you don't combine that with soft skills, a team is going to just flame out and burn. They're not going to be effective, and so that's why you see more soft skills, I think, than hard skills on this list. And so let's just take a look at that. Really, what we're talking about is you need a it's a challenging list of capabilities with hard and soft skills. You need people with tremendous capabilities here on a quality team in order for it to be successful. And whether they call them superheroes or just multi-talented, multitasking people, whatever, those people are pretty special people on these quality teams. And so let's talk about those hard skills, and I want to share with you a few examples of hard skills being put into play in regards to this particular model. And remember, what we talked about, we begin with data collection, we do the real-time monitoring, the workflow management, we do the advanced reporting, but it's all centered around this quality hub where all the data resides. So let's talk about those hard skills in terms of a couple of case studies. And the first one I'd like to talk about, this is probably the most impressive case study that I've seen thus far in all my 15 years at InfinityQS International. This case study has to do with a company that was making folded cartons. Now, here are a few pictures of folded cartons. Basically, if you go to your grocery store and you buy most anything off the shelves, you're going to find that it's got a package around the product, and if it's a carton, it's what they call in industry a folded carton. So a cereal box is a great example of a folded carton. So anyhow, this was, going on 10 years ago, but there was an organization I was working with who needed some help from a quality standpoint, and at some point the corporation, which had multiple plants around the world, the corporation said, you know what, here are our worst plants. And they asked me to go to one plant, their absolute worst plant from a quality standpoint. And they told me this plant is likely going to be closed within the year if they can't get their quality up to snuff. And it got to the point where the customers of this plant were stating that they're going to pull millions of dollars of business unless this plant gets their quality up and running and improved. And so what the corporation did, they brought me in, but then they brought in a new plant manager. And this plant manager and I worked together, but the plant manager told me, he said, you know what, I'm going to let the data tell me what actions I need to take to improve the quality of this plant. And so what he instituted was an acceptance sampling scheme that said, you know what, let's take the final product, and the way that a folded carton, and we're going to take the final product and inspect it. Let me just tell you a little bit about the way the folding carton plants work. They have, they take sheets of this white sheets of this cardboard type product, and they cut it, and then they send it over to the printing presses. The printing presses print all these pretty pictures and such on that white sheet. It's still flat. And then they take those printed sheets and they send them over to the cutting presses. And the cutting presses use dies to cut out these different forms of the boxes. And it's still flat though. So then once they've been cut, then they send these cut bits of sheet that have been printed, they send them over to what's called the folder gluer. And so that's where, like it says, you fold the boxes and you glue the edges, but what they do is they're flat. And so then they take those flat boxes and they put them into containers and they ship them off to the customers. Well, right before they put them in the containers to ship them to customers, they put in an inspection system that allowed you had inspectors at each one of their production lines, and they would check a dozen or more of these folded cartons before they actually got placed in the boxes that got shipped off. What they did is they inspected them for defects, and they made notes of those defects in software, and then after about a week, and they did it every hour at every one of the production lines. And if you can imagine, 24/7 operation, after a week, they had a tremendous amount of data. And so what did we do? Well, the plant manager came in. He assembled his management team. The guy's name is Chris. He's the plant manager. Chris assembled his management team and said, okay, let's take a look at the data. And the first thing he did is he took out a Pareto chart, and he showed the defect. The top bar on the Pareto chart was the most prevalent defect across all production lines, across all product codes, and he said, that's what we're going to work on this week. And what they did is they basically did what Deming said long ago, you just let the data tell you what you need to improve, and that's exactly what Chris and his team did. Long story short, after 9 months, they were getting letters from their customers who had been threatening earlier to pull millions of dollars of business. These same customers were seeing letters, which I read, that said something to the effect, we don't know what you guys are doing there, but keep doing it because we haven't had any problems in months. After less than a year, after only 9 months, Chris's plant was producing less than 0.1% defects at that plant, which was an order of magnitude less than what they had been producing before. But what he did is he said, we're going to let the data tell us what improvements to make in the process. And so those Pareto charts showed them or told them which part of the production plant they needed to work on. And this is just a great example of a hard skills success story. That is, Chris and his management team made data-based decisions to improve the overall quality of that plant. And literally, this plant went from the worst quality plant in the entire enterprise for this corporation to the top 3 best quality plants in the entire corporation. And they had such success doing that Chris went on to 4 other plants before moving up the corporate ladder. But he basically replicated that data-based decision-making, that hard skills success story at multiple different plants. Now, I say it's a hard skills success story. Primarily, it was a data-driven decision-making success story in terms of making quality improvements. But, of course, Chris did work with his team, but he had to make some pretty tough decisions. So he was really more on the hard skills side than he was on the soft skills side, even though he had the team around him. Another example of hard skills, and this particular example has to do with creating reports and performing analyses on those reports. This company was a consumer products company, and there was a tremendous success story here as well in regards to the hard skills. what happened here was this is a company that makes products that you can go buy in Home Depot and Lowe's, and they're inexpensive products, less than $10 each. But this company, they're a huge company, and they're number one in their particular industry, and they have over 175 suppliers out there. Now, the interesting thing about this company is they don't make anything. They only assemble the products that are made for them by their vendors. And I should say they only assemble the pieces of the product that their vendors send them. They just assemble them, okay? Well, what they wanted to do is they wanted to get a good feel for what their the quality was from each of their vendors. So they asked their vendors to send an Excel spreadsheet every week, every Friday, about the quality data that they have checked on the products that they are manufacturing for this big company. Well, as you can imagine, if you've got 175 vendors out there, what happened? Well, every Friday afternoon, 175 Excel spreadsheets got emailed to this company's quality team. And so there were 7 members of this quality team, and it got to the point where all they did was analyze and look at and work with these Excel spreadsheets. That's all they did. And these are corporate people, the corporate quality team, and then they had to make heads or tails of the data, and you know how it is when you're typing numbers into Excel. There were errors, there were problems, there were data outside specification limits that the vendor was unaware of, and anyhow, it was a mess. It was a real mess. And so what they did is they finally said, you know what, time out. Let's not do this any longer. Let's ask these vendors, instead of sending us an Excel spreadsheet every week and asking us to just pour over thousands of data values and numbers, instead of doing that, how about if we just link into our vendors' systems and have our vendors, when they're doing the quality checks, let's have those quality checks sent to this quality hub in real time. So in other words, let's get rid of the Excel spreadsheets. Instead, what they did is they had their vendors actually, when they're doing the measurements, when they're doing their quality checks, at the moment they did those quality checks, they were made available in this quality hub. So the really cool thing about this was that now that team of quality folks at the corporate level, they didn't have to worry about Excel spreadsheets. They just would go to the quality hub and they'd do their analysis with the embedded statistical tools to be able to analyze the quality of their vendors. So in other words, they were getting vendor quality data about the quality of those products before the vendor ever shipped those products to the assembly plants they were shipping to. So they didn't have to worry about incoming certificates of analysis. All they had to do was just receive those data values in real time over the internet. So pretty cool case study of the hard skills, allowing the ease of reporting and ease of analysis on the part of the folks receiving those products from vendors. Another case study, real quick about the hard skills. I worked directly with this organization who was doing some welding, and they wanted to improve the welding quality. And this welding it's a little different. It was what they call stud welding. Imagine a fairly large aluminum gun-type product where you slip about a 2-inch aluminum stud into the end, and then you weld that stud onto a flat piece of workpiece of aluminum. It was a very challenging thing to do. They had very high scrap levels, and the engineer came to me and said, "Hey, Doug, do you know anything about experimental design?" I said, "Sure." Well, what had been happening was the operators who were trying to do that, they were doing their level best to try and figure out how is it that we can make these welds better. And they finally threw up their hands and said, you know what, this is very complex. And if you have any experience with the welding process, it is extraordinarily complex because there are so many different factors that you can tweak and so many different settings you can change in welders to improve, and typically they interact with one another. And so anyhow, the operators just weren't sure what to do, and they're just kind of operating blindly, and they just finally said, time out, let's see if we can get some quality help here. So the quality team got together, and I helped them to do some experimental design, and what we found was we scientifically identified the best settings on those welders in order to get the least defects and the most adhesion. And they were just so happy that we worked together as a team to do that. But we used the problem-solving skills. We used our analytical skills. We used our technical skills. as a team, working together. And I'm telling you, I couldn't have done that. No one person could have done that without the operators' interaction, without spending time with them, without having those soft skills. So it's not just the hard skills that are super important, but you have to combine those hard skills and those techniques with the soft skills. And so let's talk a little bit about that. Again, in relation to this particular model, where we collect the data, we monitor it, we do the workflow management, we do the advanced reporting, we can't do all that hard skill stuff without the people to interact properly with one another. So, again, I wanted to emphasize how impressed I am with quality professionals, with quality managers in particular, because it seems like they're always on the plane working with suppliers, with vendors, going to different plants, and they're also working within their own plant, but they're working with different departments and so forth. And the ability to have someone to effectively interact with a diverse set of different people from different cultures, from different plants and different companies and different suppliers, it's most impressive. And generally you find quality managers are just like that. They have tremendous interpersonal skills and the ability to interact with others. So that's one of those things that I don't know if you can test for that, but boy, you surely can sort that out during an interview as to whether or not that person has those skills. Leadership, boy, what do you say about this? So here's Jack Welch is probably one of the most famous leaders in global business, and this guy was so successful. And I like what he says: when you become a leader, success is all about growing others. And what I've seen for quality teams, for the people that lead those teams, I've found that there is a tremendous interest in the success of the individuals, not just the team, but the success of the individuals. And there's a certain amount of, hey, you know what, we need to do this for this person or help this person in this particular area so that helps the entire team. So there's certainly an awareness of that. Also, when you look at this, I love this quote down here from Simon Jacobson. He's an analyst at Gartner. He said, other than finance, no other business function touches more of the organization and impacts the bottom line like quality control does. And that's saying a ton in one sentence. But it's saying that the quality professionals that we deal with, they touch so many different parts of the business, and their actions mean a lot in terms of the bottom line. Jack Welch was instrumental in getting Six Sigma teams and methodologies employed throughout his organization, and it's one of those things that you just can't talk enough about. There's so many leadership books out there, and you can apply leadership in so many different ways. And if you're going to have an effective quality team here, boy, you got to have someone that's going to be an effective leader for those teams. Communication skills. Boy, we can talk all day about this. Let's not. But in every single job posting that I've ever seen, regardless of the job posting that it is, you always see excellent communication skills required. Why is that? Well, I can have the most technically astute person, an engineer, a statistician, or someone else who knows all the quality tools, but if they cannot communicate verbally and otherwise with other individuals or other organizations, then they're just not going to be good for a team. No matter how good their hard skills are, if they can't speak about them, if they can't communicate the information, then that's going to be a very difficult person to have on the team. Judgment, decision-making comes along with the team as well in terms of soft skills. And I'm showing you here a timeline of different product recalls in different companies. More recently, we've heard about the Toyota recalls, the Peanut Corporation of America recalls, Maple Leaf Foods recalls recently. And you see companies deal with these recalls in very, very different ways. In other words, they make judgments, and they make decisions as to how to handle those recalls. And, for example, in 2000, when there was the Firestone issues with the Ford Explorers, even though the Ford engineers working with both Firestone and corporate Ford, even though those engineers put in place recommendations as to what changes should have been made from a safety standpoint to prevent the recall, those recommendations were ignored. I mean, judgment, decision-making on the part of the people leading the quality systems is so vitally important. And none is more of a better representation of fine judgment and fine decision-making than the Tylenol scare 30 years ago in 1982. I'm not sure if anybody remembers that, but I surely do. Tylenol spent over $100 million of its own money removing all Tylenol products from all shelves in North America, and they did that. Why? To protect the lives of people who might be impacted by it. Now, they could have waffled. They could have said, well, it's just centralized there in Chicago. We're really not going to worry with it anywhere. We'll just pull the stuff in Chicago. They didn't. They pulled everything off the shelves in North America at tremendous expense. But even today, people still talk about that judgment, that decision on the part of their quality team, of their leadership. That decision helps cement in the minds of us in North America that company was certainly concerned more about our health than it was about their bottom line. So tremendous goodwill from that. And so judgment, decision-making is so different. It's all across the board, in particular in regards to the recalls that we've seen recently. But just thought I'd share that with you as well. But any quality team that you've got, the soft skills of making judgments and good decisions, it's not just about the data. It's about other factors that can play in as well. So there's more than just the data that has to be evaluated. It's what's the best decision, what's the best judgment we can make concerning these other factors, not just the data. I'd like to talk more also about a willingness to learn new methods and systems. That's one of the skills we've been talking about is the interest of individuals to learn new things, to be open to new ideas. And because of the rapid change that we've seen in the marketplace and technology and so forth, we've got to have that ability to be open to new things if our quality teams are going to continue to be successful in the future. A great example of this is early in my career when I was out at the Boeing company. I worked with a guy out on the manufacturing shop floor. He was a machine operator. His name's Tom Brown. And Tom ran a twin spindle Matsuura machine out there on the shop floor, and it was a mill. And so Tom was a crusty old guy, and he'd been there for a long time, and I was right out of college. But someone at the company said, you know what, Doug, you got to get SPC going out there at this place first. If you can convince Tom to use SPC, well, he's going to influence everybody else. So I went down there and I talked with him. And I'll never forget what Tom said to me. He said, what do you think you're going to teach me, college boy? That's what he said to me. I got to laugh at it now, but back then when I was, my mid-20s, it was pretty intimidating to have a guy like this who'd been at the company and on the shop floor for that long say something like that to me. So I sat down with Tom, and over a period of weeks, he and I talked and worked through some things, and I convinced him to just take a few measurements of some of the critical features on these parts he was making. And what I did is I'd come back with a control chart. I'm actually creating paper control charts, and I'd take his numbers, I'd put it on the control chart, and I'd bring it right back to him. And I'd say, hey, what's this mean? And so after a while, he started thinking, oh, wait a minute, no, there's something going on here. And he helped to identify from the control chart. The control chart itself helped him to identify some major problems that he'd been having with his machine, and he couldn't believe it. He said, you know what? You're showing me on this chart what I thought was going wrong with my machine, but I couldn't tell anybody because it didn't have the data. Well, he was so impressed with that, he soon became a serious advocate of statistical process control, and he, for lack of a better word, he infected the rest of those operators on that shop floor, and he even got to the point where he was promoted to the SPC coordinator for the entire plant. It was a huge plant, and I still look back on it fondly because for this one reason. Tom, regardless of his background, he was willing to listen to a new idea. He had an open mind, and even though he wasn't real happy to see me initially, he was able to hear something new and embrace it. So I was really, really impressed with that. Now, that's just one example of that ability to be open and accepting of new stuff. And boy, the quality teams that I've seen who are open-minded like that make tremendous inroads much faster. Manage multiple priorities, we all know about that. We're lean, we're mean these days, and if you can't prioritize your day with your list, boy, it's tough to get anything done, so I won't talk a whole lot about that. Teamwork, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about this either, but I love the quote. Teamwork divides the task and multiplies the success. I love that because it talks to the diversity that's required on a team. And if you get those diverse people together with the different backgrounds, the different knowledge, and you mix it all together, you can certainly have more success than if you have one or two people working on it. So two heads are better than one for sure. So what can we do right now? If you're looking at your quality team, what can you do right now? And I'm going to share with you some things that we do inside our company at InfinityQS. First thing is you can create a team skills matrix. The first time someone told me to do this, I was a little surprised. I thought, yeah, that's kind of silly. But then when I said, okay, here are the skills we need in the top in a column format, and then here are the people identified in rows, and then I put an X in there for who has the right skills, and well, it very quickly identifies the gaps. It very quickly says, okay, these people have these gaps, and so therefore that helps me to plan who needs what education. So I was really kind of surprised with that. It seems like a simple thing to suggest, but I think you'll be surprised that some of these simple tools are quite powerful. Secondly, perform a quality systems gap analysis. You can do that both inside your own organization or outside, and I've been a part of both of these. But an internal quality system gap analysis, that's great practice for your quality team to just take a closer look at the quality system itself and say, okay, where do we have gaps? Where do we have issues that we need to fix? And then once you've got a little bit of that practice behind you, doing it internally, going outside the organization is a real eye-opener. For those of you who've had a chance to do benchmarking outside your own organization, different companies, different industries, you know what I'm talking about. And for those people who have had the privilege of going out and working with customers and doing a gap analysis for your customers regarding your own company's quality, wow, boy, that is an eye-opener as well. So, and it's interesting, when you go and do those things, when you go work with customers or OEM partners or whoever it is that your company works with, and you ask them to tell you about your own quality system and what the quality of the products look like, when you ask them to do that and you create a gap analysis, they're typically very, very interested in interacting with you. So performing those quality system gap analyses, both internally and externally, that's great stuff for your team to do, if only for practice. And also, well, it also helps to identify new stuff you need to consider. But it's one of those things that you just can't go wrong doing those gap analyses. Third, explore the newest technologies and training options. Teamwork, meeting, communication skills. There's lots of classes out there. Most of them are very inexpensive. I've been very surprised myself by going to what I thought was going to be some very basic training that turned out to be illuminating. So I suggest keep working on that. Keep going to those classes. Go to the content online. A lot of companies now are offering free online content in regards to these items, and it never hurts to share that with your team and go through these training classes as a team. So also statistical methods, process control methods. Just because someone went through a stat class way back in college doesn't mean they know anything about SPC. So make sure that people are able to go through and learn more about those types of technologies, especially when it comes to statistical methods. A lot of the hard skills have to do with number crunching and analysis, so definitely do that. Also, InfinityQS does offer blogs and articles on our website, so we try to have our application engineers and other technical staff add to the listings of information available to our customers and others, so you may want to do that as well. Make a commitment to training yourself. There's lots of leadership books out there, team-building books. I've got a whole bunch of those books and others right behind me here that I'll pick up and read when I've got time or at night or whatever, and it's surprising how I think I know something and then I read one of these books and it's like, you know what, I didn't know that. So develop a plan for yourself, and there's nothing better than sharing it with your peers and even your boss. If you want to develop a plan for self-improvement, to train yourself in different technologies and different techniques, nothing like sharing it with your boss, because now that person has that piece of paper and they can hold your feet to the fire and say, hey, where are you on that plan? So those are just a few things you can do right now. In conclusion, just a few things here. I like to say past performance is not a predictor of future success. We've all read that when reading a prospectus for a mutual fund or whatever. But what we've done in the past doesn't necessarily mean that if we continue doing that, it means doesn't necessarily mean we'll be successful in the future. Also, quality systems must begin focusing on the entire supply chain. The idea of this quality hub and putting all this quality data, regardless of where that data came from, putting it all in one single central repository, it means incredible things to those people who want to analyze data and truly understand where the opportunities for improvement lie, regardless of where those opportunities are across the entire supply chain. Restaffing is expensive, better to train your existing team members and continue to assess what those team members need in terms of knowledge and skills. And look at the fourth bullet point says the best teams are those that continually, one, strive for new knowledge and embrace new ideas from outside the organization. I love benchmarking because, and I've done this several times where I go out with a quality team and benchmark, but we go to different organizations, outside our industry altogether, and it's so funny what you learn. You're still looking at the same quality system, but you're looking at it in a completely different industry. The way they do it may be totally backwards from where you are and may be very, very beneficial. Also, the best teams are those that continually improve both those hard skills and soft skills, so continue going down the path of improvement there. Also, lastly, okay, I'm biased a little bit. I am a statistician, but when we start talking about the ability to get information from data, it typically is the use of statistical methods. So I like to talk about the transformation of data into information, and that's what statistical tools are all about. So, last thing, I'm about to do Q&A here in just a moment, but I'd like to invite Emily to come back into the discussion because we're about to have our 5th annual Infusion Users Conference in Denver, Colorado, and we'd like to invite you to that. Emily, anything you'd like to say about this?
Absolutely. As Doug said, we want to invite you guys to join the best and the brightest in quality at this year's Infusion. We are doing it in Denver, Colorado, and it's really a chance for you to learn the best practices and the latest techniques in getting the most out of your quality system. The conference is a great opportunity to network with InfinityQS customers and a real chance for you to get some one-on-one time with our experts, Doug included. Registration is open now, and the early bird rate expires July 31st, which is next Tuesday. We're also offering a group discount this year, so if you'd like to send more than one person from your company, that's also another consideration for you. So if you'd like more information, I encourage you to visit the website we've got listed there on the slide. And then just one more announcement. If you enjoyed today's presentation, please keep an eye out for our webinar schedule. We'll be continuing to add more topics. Next month, we're actually doing one that's on building a business case for SPC. So keep your eyes tuned for more information. We'll be posting it on the website under our webinar section on the website. All right, thanks, Doug.
All right, thanks, Emily. Okay, I know we're running out of time. I really do appreciate you spending some time with us this afternoon, and be happy to take questions. Now, by the way, you can continue this discussion on our LinkedIn page, which you'll see there, www.infinityqs.com/LinkedIn_11skills. But this time, if you don't mind, there's a chat box there. I think there's a Q&A. Is that right, Emily? There's a Q&A area on the...
That's correct. It's up at the top of your screen. It's a little question mark in a square, and you can type your questions in there. Okay,
very good. Well, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my desktop and go over to that Q&A area and see if I can get any questions from anybody. Okay, there's a question here from Andrea, and the question is, what is the best way to explore the newest technology without spending all the money that comes with it? Oh, wow. Well, there's a few things come to mind. One is I'm a real advocate of reading periodicals. And so I'll just, like I mentioned, or maybe I didn't mention this. I don't think I did. I'm holding a magazine in my hand. It's called IEEE Spectrum, and it's subtitled The Magazine of Technology Insiders. And this is a brilliant little magazine. I just picked this up at the airport one day, and I like to pick up magazines that I haven't picked up before. And because we're in the software world, I like this idea of it's called, once again, IEEE Spectrum, and it's called the Magazine of Technology Insiders. So anyhow, that's one way. I like looking at the periodicals and just looking at what's new. This one was kind of interesting. I picked it up mainly because it had to do with technology, and one of the articles had to do with it says the last days of cash, and so it's talking about how we really don't need cash anymore, and so what does that mean from a technology standpoint? But that's just one way of doing it. Another way is you'll find that, for example, LinkedIn is a great source. If you go to linkedin.com, If you can give them, you can have them. Let me slow down. If you go to LinkedIn.com and you sign in and sign up or whatever, they'll send you emails occasionally, and it'll tell you stuff about the newest technologies, management stuff that's coming down the pike, and so forth. So it's website specific. If you don't like the periodicals, that's one way of doing it. There's another guy that I really like hearing from. I went to a quality symposium a couple of years ago, and there was the keynote speaker was Joel Barker, and I'm not sure if anybody's heard of Joel Barker, but he calls himself a futurist. And a futurist, well, what's that mean? Well, it's a guy that says he reads the tea leaves in technology and everything else, and he predicts what is coming down the pike in the future. So whether it's Joel Barker or this IEEE Spectrum periodical or LinkedIn or one of those other technology websites that can send you emails occasionally, those are just a few ways of exploring the newest technologies without spending all the money. Now, there's one more thing there. What you'll find is, like InfinityQS, a lot of software companies will offer a free trial, a 30-day trial of their software. And we take advantage of that with different software products that we may be interested in using at our organization. And so that's another thing, is that if you find out about one of these new technologies, and if you don't want to spend all that money, you can ask for a free trial. I'd like to encourage people to do that. I mean, hey, we do it as a company as well. So, Andrew, I hope that answers your question. Any other questions that I can answer?
Doug, I've got one on my end, if that will help.
Sure, please.
All right, this one, it says, for small companies less than 60 people with limited resources in quality group, how is it cost effective to implement SPC?
Wow. Well, that's a great question because, like I mentioned earlier, I've been to these companies where they're extraordinarily lean, and there's just not a lot of human power there to be able to do a lot of the things that I've talked about. You don't have 2 or 3 hours during the day to get together 6 employees out of 60. That's 10% of your workforce to work through certain things. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to encourage people to, if you've got very little time and resources available, we're trying to encourage our customers to try and prioritize what are the most important things. I mean, the top most important things, not the top 20%, the top 5% of things that you have to look at in order to ensure your quality is spot on. And for example, one plant I went to, this is a telecommunications company down in the state of Georgia. I went down there and I worked with them, and they had the exact same thing. Small company, and they had very few people, but the quality was so vitally important to them. And I said to them, you really need to consider automation of this data collection. And they had this cable they were producing, and they had to confirm certain things on that cable. What they did is they bit the bullet, and they put money into a PLC, a programmable logic controller system, out on the shop floor to automatically gather the data, and then we push that data into InfinityQS software. And so what they were able to do is, even though they had to spend that money up front on the hardware and software to get the data, they didn't have to have any humans do it. And so they had the data, and it actually were able to create automatic reports, which were then provided to their managers so that they could get the information they needed very quickly without having to spend a ton of time in team meetings or anything like that. So the more that we can automate the data collection, automate the reporting, automate the emailing and or the website updating, the more we can do that, the less we have to worry with getting together for several hours during the day to have a team meeting. Okay, hopefully that answers the question. There's a question here, Emily, probably more for you than for me, but this is a question from Jeff. And it says, is there a way that I can download this slide presentation?
Absolutely. We will make the slides as well as the recording of the webinar available later this week. So all of the attendees will receive an email with both of those pieces, and then you're actually able to go back and review any old webinars that we have on our website under resources. and we have an actual archive of past webinars. So I encourage you to check those out as well. But yes, we will be sending out the slides and the recording.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Okay. Emily, any additional questions on your end?
No, that looks like it's it for me. I guess we could probably go ahead and wrap it up, but if anybody thinks of something later, as Doug mentioned, you can go to our LinkedIn group and continue the discussion there.
Great, great. Well, again, I want to thank everybody for your time this afternoon. I know you're very busy people, but it's always it's a real pleasure to have you here. And from InfinityQS International, I want to thank you. And we hope to see you at our users conference in Denver, Colorado this September. And so thanks once again, and have a good day.